Welcome to MDIA1400 Video Production Basics Instructional Media Series. I'm Professor Brian Plow. I'm going to be walking you through the next 7 weeks, both in the classroom and a little bit online. Okay, this is video number 2, the Final Cut Pro interface. This is a very basic overview of libraries, events, the browser, the viewer, the inspector, the project, additional browsers, all the things in the interface, generally what they do, and a little bit about workflow, like A to B, how you start and where you end. But again, very, very basic. All the subsequent videos after this will be showing things in much more detail. Okie dokie. Alright, so I've launched Final Cut Pro. You see this is the icon. It's already in my dock. And I bring that up. And you can see that I've already been working on something. And I thought that was a little bit more explanatory than just showing you an empty interface. Show you actually stocked with media both in different places to better illustrate what Final Cut Pro does. Okay, everything kind of moves from left to right in Final Cut. And so we start in the upper left, and we start right up here. This is a library. There are 4 purple boxes with stars, and this is the main container in Final Cut Pro. Everything is contained within that library. We can create new libraries, we can create multiple libraries, whatever we want, however you want to organize your media, but generally what I do is I create a library for a project. And within that library, I can have these smaller subfolders called events. And within an event, I might have separate those events out based on the type of footage or the location or a character or a scene. But I can create as many events as I want within that library. If I created a new event, I would name it, and you'd see it would pop up here. And within these events, we can create projects. And a new project looks like this. It's got the icon with the slate clapboards above it. An empty project just looks like this. I've yet to edit anything in that. All projects are contained within events. So I'm going to bring up the one I've been working on and double click it, and it loads down here in the project or timeline window. Okay, we're going to get to that in a second. We're going to do a little bit more exploration over here in the browser. So we've explained everything with libraries and events and those relationships. I'm going to move that out of the way so we can get a little bit more room here. Now this is, we have a particular event selected, and within that we have our project files. We have audio only media that's represented by waveform, which is a graphical representation of audio. And then we have video clips with video and audio. So I see the waveform down here, but I see the visual thumbnail.
But also what we see.
And everything is in a nice clean thumbnail. Everything has the same size. I can look at things in more detail with my scale bar. If I slide it to the right, I can see these thumbnails get larger. If they're too long to stay in a single row, there's a jagged edge. You can tell that this clip continues. If I played this through, you see that playhead goes to the next row, and it'll stop here at the yellow band. So I'll put it back to the nice clean thumbnails here. We can also look at things in a list view, which lists the files and shows us one big thumbnail at the top based on whatever we choose. I'm a little bit more of a visual person. I like seeing the visual thumbnails all together like this. Kind of gives me a good sort of bird's eye view, big picture look at what I'm working with here on a project. Okay, now we're going to move to the viewer. The viewer is self-explanatory. It's where we see what we're working with here. Final Cut Pro always likes to know what you're working with, and the way we do that is we click or select something, and whatever we select, we see that yellow band around it, that ubiquitous yellow band that just tells us, hey, this is what we're working with. Doesn't matter if it's down here in the timeline or up here in the browser. The viewer auto recognizes that and shows us whatever we have selected. It also, regardless of what we select, if we just hover our cursor over any piece of media in the timeline or up in the browser, it scrubs or skims through that at whatever speed we move our cursor. And then of course if we go back, click on a piece of media, select where our playhead is by clicking in a particular portion of that clip, it shows us, we can do the same thing down here, that will auto-recognize where we click, where we place our playhead. The inspector is a little bit more complicated. It's not a visual representation of what we're working with, but it's a lot of information about that particular clip. So if I click on the audio tab, again, this is my piece of media that I'm working with. It's going to show us the channel configuration and the waveform for that particular piece of audio. We could change the audio levels. We could do some audio EQ in here, which we'll show later in the class. Video, if I added any effects to this or any color correction, we would see these effects represented here. We'll get to that a little bit more later. Information about that, so this is metadata, or information about the piece of media. But that is the inspector. It shows us information, and then it also gives us some options to manipulate attributes for that image or sound. Okay, I'm going to move down here into the timeline, or the project. You notice here that we can change projects just by double-clicking on any of our project icons. You see that it loads up that project. I can also switch projects, recently used projects here, with the backward and forward button. I'm going to let this play through a little bit. You see that we hear our sounds, and we can see where our edits are going to take place. They're represented graphically here. Our sounds are mixed together. You see that we've got multiple tracks plus a music track here. And they're separate from the audio. I've separated them.
Flying is something I've had a passion for since I was a little kid. You know, it's virtually every time I go it's a new discovery. It's a new...
Okay, so we'll get it to there because that's our first part of the interview. His name isn't really Brett Magnum, but he does have awesome hair. Okay, so with this timeline here, this is where we're actually going to assemble all the different media that is contained up here in our browser. We're going to bring it down into the timeline, selections of it that we want, place it in the order that we want, and adjust the duration of how long or short those clips are. So it's the selection, it's the ordering, it's the duration for both video and audio and text elements or any other effect elements that you have. All of those things amalgamate together, and that's your movie, that's your film, and it takes place here. Now, the last piece of the interface that we're going to explain is over here with these additional browsers. And these additional browsers have different tabs, different browsers here. We have a transitions browser, and we can preview anything that we want here. This is a cross dissolve, some crazy wipes, some blooms, and these would be any transition between two shots, two pieces of media can be manipulated. So any transition that we have here, we can click, hold, and drag it. You see that it places it on either side of the clip, and then once we have that, we can manipulate it up here in whatever way that Final Cut Pro allows us. It's a nice transition for that. In the text browser, you see a lot of different options of prefabricated text elements that Final Cut Pro gives you. Anything from like cheesy stuff like this to just custom, where once you place it in the timeline, you can manipulate placement, any sort of graphical design element for that text. And that's generally what I use a lot of. So you can click, hold, and drag anywhere into the timeline. Let it go, place it here, and then you see it just gives you this basic title text here. But if I have that selected and I place this, I can add whatever I want to it. And then I can change its size, and I could change anything I want to about it, including its color. I could give it a drop shadow, a glow, an outline. And then with the viewer, I can change its placement on screen and place that wherever I want. And that's generally how these elements from these browsers interact with the timeline. The last thing we would do is we would share this. This is, again, everything works from left to right. This is in the far right. Can't get any further right in the interface. And this is the share button. And we want to share this project. That is synonymous with export. So I always choose master file. And we have our settings here. I'm going to breeze through those. Brings up a basic share or basic save dialog box. And I'm going to go ahead and save that. And I already did, so I can show you what it looks like. And there's our video. There's our movie that we created. It's no longer in Final Cut Pro. It's self-contained as a QuickTime file that I could upload to YouTube. Quick review here. The basics of the workflow. Libraries, events, projects. Here's our browser where we see our media that we've imported. We can see anything we want in the viewer based on where our playhead is or where we are skimming. We shot selection, shot ordering, and duration for both audio and video in the timeline as we construct our video. We add text or effects or generators or whatever we need to here to augment or enhance that project. We manipulate all text elements and all effects here in the inspector, and we're always seeing the results of our work here in the viewer. And then when we're done, we share. And that is the basic sort of bird's eye 10,000 foot view of the interface and the workflow in Final Cut Pro. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me in class or reach out to me via email, plow@ohio.edu. Thank you.